Thank you, Jenna, and sorry for interrupting you with this meeting is being recorded. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Weird Church's weekly gathering. I'm the Reverend Ingrid, and I'm a minister at Weird Church. Weird Church is a place of belonging, a place of spiritual exploration, a place where we can come together to learn and discuss and pray and disagree with one another and then stay. There's no, you have to believe X to be a part of our community. There's no spiritual, you must be this high to ride. Here, you're welcome no matter your marital status, your race, your background, your sexual orientation, your gender identity. Whether you believe in God or not, and you just want to see what weird things are happening here, you are welcome, no matter what. That said, I'm ordained in the United Church, so I wear a certain set of lenses, and I bring that education and that teaching here with me. But I'm thrilled to host a community where the wisdom of everybody in attendance is celebrated and acknowledged. We do use words like God and prayer, and we're going to use some pretty churchy words here today, but know that we mean these words with the most wide and generous understanding of them possible. I do want to have a little caveat here, because normally at this point in the service I say, here at Weird Church, we like to say that a little discomfort is a good thing, but a lot is not. Today we're talking about something that is a bit more intimate. It is something that is maybe scary to talk about in church for a lot of us, and it has to do with sexual orientation and gender identity. And I'm going to rip apart a bunch of things you think you know about the Bible. So if you feel a little bit uncomfortable, I will again say that's a very good thing, but I want to make sure that nobody's feeling wildly uncomfortable, or if there's something that's really challenging, I want you to stop me, or I want you to talk to me about it later, because this is tender heart stuff. And so I am happy to have 100 conversations after this about what the heck it was that I was saying. Jenna recommended that I record this so that if anyone wants to go back and say, wait, what did she say about that again? You can do that. We won't record the conversation piece of our time together, because that is a more vulnerable and tender space of sharing and learning, and so I'll just stop actually Ella will stop the recording at that time, but I just want you to know that we're aiming to make brave space where we can be honest in our learning. Of course, we can't guarantee safe space, because I don't know what everyone's going to say, but I just ask that everything we talk about stay rooted and grounded in love. So before we go any further, I want to recognize and acknowledge that Weird Church and all of us here stand on land that First Nations people have walked on since time immemorial. Where this church stands is the unceded territory of the Comox Nation, the Kwakwala-speaking people, caretakers of the land of plenty, and we do this every time we gather to make clear that we are on this land to be of service, that we're on this land in gratitude and to move in a new way. And because we're on land that belongs to the Kwakwala people, we're learning how to get comfortable with Kwakwala. And so every Sunday, we learn a new word or phrase together so that the language of this place is comfortable in our mouths. And so we get real uncomfortable while we get comfortable. This is actually a word that we've learned before, but I wanted to bring it back again today because it is fitting. And it's lakwala. 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 And it means loved ones. Lakwala. So I have some upcoming announcements. Next week, I am away. Jenna will be leading the service and Gregor will be doing music. I'm sure that extra hands to set up candle tables, things will be desired, appreciated, celebrated, danced upon. So if you can do that, that would be great. And the gallery at Weird Church, you've seen some art on the walls, but we're making it official now. Why did that sound oddly like marriage? We now have an official gallery that is being curated by Joan Udell, and so 23rd is the official opening, so there will be, well, we're not exactly sure what we can offer in terms of refreshments, but at least there will be, the artist will be present here, so you can check our website for some more details on that. So look for Carol Nottingham's art to be up on the walls, and we just have some really fantastic artists in the months ahead, so I'm super stoked about that.
It's going to be very civilized. There will be some guest musicians as well.
Oh, a guest musician. I wonder.
While the gallery is
happening. Would we know any of these guest musicians? We might know them. Okay. And then September 25th, which is the Saturday following, during the day we have the Rotary Food Drive, which is happening. So we need some volunteers to be in the lobby, churchy word, narthex, at noon on that Saturday to receive donations. And then we're going to sort and stack them so that the food shed outside stays plentiful and stocked all winter long. Last time the Rotary did a food drive for us, we had more food than we knew what to do with, so I'm trying to find some more shelving, and hopefully we will have lots to cram in the food shed all winter. What else do I have? Oh, and then that night is Weird Cafe, which is our monthly music night, and this month's theme is swing music. So come on in. We're trying to still understand exactly what it means for vaccine passports and who needs to be checking them. We don't need to for our Sunday services. We may need to for that unless it's less than 50 people, and then maybe we don't. It's all new for all of us, so we're all trying to figure that out, but we will need masks for sure for that. So we've got the gallery opening on the 23rd. Oh, and we've got the 21 things you may not know about the Indian Act study group that night too, 7 p.m. here and online. So read the book, 21 Things You May Not Know About the Indian Act, and then join our Truth and Reconciliation team in person or online for that discussion. And then on the 29th, there's a United Church panel discussion online. What has happened? I lost my notes. There we go. I didn't even touch anything. Ella, what have you done? Just kidding. There's a panel discussion that the Indigenous Church within the United Church of Canada is hosting, which is Indigenous Children Then, Now, and Tomorrow. And so it's a panelist talking about the 60 scoop, the 90 scoop residential schools, and what happened, what's happening, and looking ahead to the future. There's a lot of things that I just said now. Is there anyone else that has announcements? Melissa.
Is that panel discussion online that we said?
Yeah, the panel discussion on the 29th is online.
And in the evening or something?
Yeah, I believe it's 7 p.m.
And just next week, Saturday, there's a huge market day here in Cumberland.
Yes.
Takes over the whole street, pedestrian-friendly, children and adults, elders, everybody's welcome. And it's crafts, mostly local stores for food and music. Any of us, myself included, are playing at 2 different stages.
Sweet.
Throughout the day on Saturday the 18th.
Thank you. I think it's called the Foggy Mountain Fall Fair.
Correct.
Saturday in Cumberland on Dunsmuir. Music, food, Saturday. Entertainment, booths, Saturday. Okay. Anything else? Okay. There's a donation basket at the back. You get a tax receipt if you donate. You can do that online as well, or if you want to do monthly, the forms that you fill out to get that done are back there too. That is all I'm going to say about anything. So let's all just take a big deep breath in and let it out. Let's do it again. Allowing ourselves to get grounded in this place, in this space, I'm gonna light this candle. No, this candle. Does anyone have? The bin.
Lighter
We do.
coming
We
up.
have a lighter. Thank you, sir. I'll give it back to you at the end of the day. You, Jenna?
We're doing Jenna.
Now I need to take another deep breath in. Now I need to reground myself. We light this candle every time we gather, not as an invitation for God to join us, but as God's presence, that divine presence, that presence of peace that surpasses all understanding is here and available to us always. We just need a reminder.
Hey, Nayana. Hey, Nayana. Hey, Nayana. Hey, ya, hey, oh. Hey, ya, hey, oh. I walk in beauty, yes I do, yes I do. I talk in beauty, yes I do, yes I do. I sing of beauty, hey ya, hey yo, hey ya, hey yo. Hey Nayana, hey Nayana, hey Nayana. Hey ya, hey yo, hey ya, hey yo.
Would you pray with me? Divine presence, scandalous one, versatile God. You have been called the worst of names, tossed aside by the hands of tradition, met with violence and neglected by stranger and kin alike, and still you do not conform to the expectations of power or polite your way into the halls of destruction. You, the ultimate transgressor of norms, you bear witness to the glory of strange. You, queer one, reveal the gifts of falling outside the lines. You, wild one, break open possibilities. Within us, around us, whispering in our ear, see me, feel me. You help us to come alive again. Beauty is your passion. Love is your motivation. Courage is your center. May your spirit be awakened in every space dull with repressed delight, that we may choose to live into the riches of this peculiar life together. Embrace us, O God, and lead us in the ways of your love, so defiant and so free. Amen.
Hey Nayana, hey Nayana, hey Nayana, hey ya, hey oh, hey ya, hey oh. I walk in beauty, yes I do, yes I do. I talk in beauty, yes I do, yes I do. I sing of beauty, hey ya, hey yo, hey ya, hey yo. Hey ya, hey ya, hey ya.
Thanks, Gregor. Okay, so I mentioned last week that September is a big month for us at Weird Church because we're celebrating 3 years of sort of being community and 1 year of being a Sunday weekly gathering community, so that's exciting. And we kicked off our weekly services in September of 2020 with the theme of justice for that month. And then we decided, well, we should just do that every September. So it's Justice Month because that is such a key value that we hold at Weird Church. So last week we opened up the topic of justice, what it means for those of us who are seeking to live lives of love, walking in a spiritual way. And today's theme is queer justice, which is a key component of who we are as a community, being intentionally welcoming for folks who are typically not fully invited into church settings. So much of what I'm sharing to you in prayers, like what I just did, are not words written by me, as they typically are. They are words written by queer theologians, ministers, writers, artists. So today, in terms of our learning time, I'm going to share a few of what are sometimes called clobber passages. These are passages that conservatives use in churches to support hateful and discriminatory attitudes, and I will share them in order to undo them. This was like entirely why I went to learn Greek in school and Hebrew, so that I could like unpick this specific topic. This was the only reason I learned Greek. It turned out to be helpful in a lot of other ways too, but and then I will share why I believe the God who created us made us the way we are, and that God calls us into the identity in all of its fullness, including our sexual orientation and gender identity. So, as I said earlier, this can bring up all sorts of feelings, discomfort, anger, relief, frustration, I don't know. So we'll try to hold a space with a whole lot of grace, a whole lot of love, coming first from a place of understanding and of love. But I'm going to do what I did last week. Instead of like reading a thing, reflecting on a thing, having a conversation, which is our normal format, I'm going to sort of break it down as I go, and then we'll talk about it. Is that good? Yes? Okay. But also stop me. If you need to stop me at some point in the middle of things and just be like, nope, stop, I have a question about this, then please do. Or if you're an introvert, just like wave at me and I'll stop. Okay, so are we ready? We're gonna do this together? Any questions online? We're good, okay. Now, actually, before I start, the amount of time that some Christian preachers speak about homosexuality or speak against homosexuality, you would think that there were like hordes of scriptures speaking against it, and there just are not. There are basically 6. 7 if you are picky and maybe want to add on this last one, but 6 really, and in my opinion, most of them are ridiculous. So the one that gets thrown around the most is from Leviticus, okay? Last week, we read from the book of Leviticus, talking about God's beautiful year of Jubilee, where debts are erased, every slate is wiped clean, everybody gets to return to their land and celebrate, and if you owe that person, and they owe that person, and they owe that person, and they owe that person, because we all owe somebody something, reset. Same book. Now, this is the one, you may be familiar with it, that reads, I don't know if I can do this without my like booming preacher voice. Thou shalt not lie with mankind as with womankind. It is an abomination. And of course, its lovely counterpart that follows a few verses later. If a man also lie with mankind as he lieth with woman, both of them have committed an abomination, and they surely shall be put to death. Their blood upon them. Now listen, I know that at first blush, this sounds pretty clear-cut and pretty harsh. But like most things, especially most things biblical, this isn't. It is super contextual. So I want to start with context. These verses come to the Israelite people, those who would be known as Jewish people, And it's a time where they are freed from, just after they are freed from slavery in Egypt. So, after generations of slavery, these are newly freed people in their own land for the first, like returning again to their own land for the first time in a long time. And they're learning how to live as free people united by their religious community. But what is important to remember is they're learning how to do that as distinct and different from other local religions in the area. So they're regaining their identity as a people. So one of the other religions in force around them practice fertility rites. It's part of their religious ritual that involved multiple sexual partners in one event, in church, or what we would, temple, what they would call church. So that was to ensure a woman got pregnant. But it also had this practice of men making sure that they could keep going. So the intent here was around separation from these other rituals. Okay, we're not part of this religious group, we're part of this religious group, so we're not engaging in these practices. So it's not about like relationship, it's about these separating ourselves from these practices. The translation, there's also this word abomination, which is problematic because we think of abomination, well, you might think of it in terms of a comic book character, but we tend to think of it as something abhorrent or disgusting. But the word here is actually better understood as something that disrupts the common identity. I also want to make clear that other things that are cited as abomination in Leviticus are eating shellfish, touching pigskin, like a football, and mixing cotton and linen to make clothing. Abominations. So even if you take it just literally and just surface level, most of the people using this one verse, or two verses kind of spaced out, as proof, they're also probably wearing like a cotton poly blend of shirt while eating shrimp and tossing a football. There's also another thing. The other thing that's at play contextually is that there's a network of prostitution happening around them. But not just like regular, like female empowering prostitution, yay, have control of your body. It was with young males, children, boys. And it was forced. And so the other thing that the prohibition is against is pedophilia. So it's not about same-sex relationship. It is just not. So we can just cross Leviticus off our list of valid arguments. Done. There's a question. Yeah. 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 That's a really interesting point. It could be about fidelity to your partner. I like it. You're probably right. Absolutely. Add that to the list of what it probably is instead. So the other one comes from Genesis, which is the first book in both Jewish and Christian scriptures, and it's a story of the destruction of the places called Sodom and Gomorrah. I'm not going to read the whole story because it's actually this really long story, but essentially God rains down burning sulfur on these two towns as a result of, if you listen to certain people, the town's rampant homosexuality. This is also where we get the term sodomize. So if you listen to some of these preachers, they will tell you that God was mad at all of this gay sex, and so God destroyed these places. But so these are Jewish scriptures, and this is not a Jewish understanding of this story. And it's actually not about that at all. So Jewish teaching uses this story to highlight that the people in these towns were wealthy and prideful and had excess of food and this like lounging about prosperous ease. And they didn't use it their wealth and their privilege to help the poor and needy. So they had those things taken away from them. Don't get me wrong, it was a rather violent way, but this was a teaching story. And also, it, in the story, wasn't the homosexuality that was the problem, it was, again, gang rape of children. So, we can cross that one also off the list of valid arguments, because I think most of us would be against that as well. And if we're going in order of passages in holy books, the next sort of place in the Bible would be the Gospels. So we're going like Hebrew scriptures, Jewish scriptures, and then into the New Testament, Christian scriptures, where the Gospels teach about Jesus, about how he came into the world, what he did, how he died, and how he rose again. So, I just want to be clear, there's absolutely nothing about the queer community in any of those books. There's not one thing. Not because there weren't gay people, or there weren't lesbians, not because there were no folks who lived in the world in a different gender identity than the sex that they were assigned at birth. Those were all present in ancient times. But it turns out Jesus didn't have anything to say about it. Okay, so there's that. He also called us all precious children of God, beautiful to behold, and told us that there was nothing we could do that would separate us from the love of God. So, if we then move into the New Testament, where we learn about the early church and Jesus after Jesus' death, we're into the part called the epistles or the letters, and it's all these little messages to the baby churches all around the Mediterranean. And again, this message is reiterated. We are God's children, beloved, honored. And there are a couple of passages that are sometimes thrown about in defense of homophobia in Corinthians, in Timothy, or Romans. But again, they just don't stand up to closer theological examination. In each of these passages, the writer condemns a certain kind of person, saying these people are not following in God's way. And in a couple of passages, there's one word, malakoi, which is used as like, don't be malakoi, this is not good. And this word malakoi is sometimes translated as effeminate, sometimes translated as homosexual, but that is not correct. The word in Greek, a direct translation, which isn't always helpful but can guide us, the direct translation is soft. Soft. But the word that is used in other ancient texts and in the Bible is about being lazy because you're wealthy. So soft meaning like you don't work hard because you don't have to, because you have money and servants for that. So that is actually the soft that is being condemned here. It actually wasn't translated as effeminate or homosexual until an American translation in 1947. So that's actually pretty recent. There are other places where we read in English Bibles, especially newer English Bibles, homosexual. But the word is pedophilia. So here we have that again. As I've mentioned earlier, boys who were servants were often sexually exploited by their masters, a practice that was so common that it actually became normative in Greek society. And so when Paul is writing these letters to these churches, he's saying, this is actually one thing we don't want you to do that is common in the culture. There were lots of common cultural practices that the new church was warned against participating in. And this was one of them. Don't have sex with children. Turns out that was great advice. So basically, what God's suggestion through these scriptures is that group sex in church, gang rape, sex with children, and gang rape of children is all out. There is nothing in all the scriptures that prohibits same-sex marriage. Not in the way we understand it today. Not in terms of loving relationship. There's some things around promiscuity that is sometimes associated, I think, unfairly with the gay community. But I actually want to talk about this friend of mine who is a United Church minister in Vancouver. And he and I were ordained at the same time. And he shares this story freely and is happy to share it as widely and freely as possible, because it was something that really made a difference in his life. So he was raised Southern Baptist down in Georgia, and raised in the church, and became evident that he was homosexual when he was a teenager, and he was sent several times to conversion therapy. If you're not familiar, conversion therapy is where you get sent away to a camp. You're often physically abused, and you're prayed over, and the sort of catchphrase is to pray the gay away. So it's ultimately saying that you are malformed in some way, and we're going to invite God to fix you. Well, it turns out that doesn't work, because that's not how that works. But he went through these really damaging processes as a teenager, and he tried to fake it so that he could fit in. So he had, he said, yep, it worked, I'm not gay anymore, and he went to seminary. And he went to Oral Roberts University, if you know that, down in the States, super conservative. And he became an ordained minister in that tradition and a worship leader, and had a lot of success in his ministerial career with music and everything. But he was dying inside because he wasn't able to be authentically who he was. And he thought who he was authentically was a sin, was against God's way, and there was something wrong with him. And he just wasn't praying hard enough, or trying hard enough, or hadn't found the right girl. So then, his work, not in ministry, he left ministry, found another way to earn a living that didn't feel quite so destructive for him, and he came out. And he thought, I can't be gay and Christian at the same time. Found a partner, fell in love. Oh, beautiful love story. Actually still with that partner today. And this was many years ago. Their work brought them to Canada, and he found the United Church. And he started finding a way forward where he could be gay and Christian at the same time. And he had a spiritual experience as a result of being welcomed into a community that said, oh no, these two things are not here. These two things can exist in you at the same time. And it's from the book of Acts. So if we're looking at the whole Bible, you have like Jewish scriptures, gospel, and then in the New Testament, after the Gospels, you have the book of Acts. So the New Testament ends with Luke, where Jesus goes up into heaven, and all the disciples are like, oh. And then they kind of look at each other and go, what do we do now? And the book of Acts starts with all the disciples like this. What do we do now? And it's the formation of the early church. And what they are coming to understand is they're trying to figure out, and all this is in Acts. Of course, I think it's awesome, but anyway. And they're trying to figure out, like, okay, if we're Jewish and we're wanting to follow Jesus, do we still need to be circumcised? If we're not Jewish and we want to follow Jesus, do we have to get circumcised first and then follow? And so there's like all of this wrestling of how do we do this? I don't know. Do you know? Okay, we're going to do our best. And they have all these different visions. This is one of those visions. At noon on the following day, doesn't matter what we're following, as their journey brought them close to the city, Peter, one of the 12 disciples, went up to the roof of this building to pray. He became hungry and wanted to eat. And while others were preparing the meal, he had a visionary experience. He saw heaven opened up and something like a large linen sheet being lowered to the earth by its four corners. Inside the sheet were all kinds of four-legged animals, reptiles, and wild birds. A voice told him, "Get up, Peter, kill and eat." Peter exclaimed, "Absolutely not. I have never eaten anything impure or unclean." Peter was Jewish. And a voice spoke a second time, "Never consider unclean what God has made pure." This happened 3 times, and then the object was suddenly brought back up to heaven. So when my friend was trying to figure out how he could let go of some of the teaching of his past and learn to understand scriptures in a different way, he had been reading this, and he too felt like he heard a voice. When he was thinking that his homosexuality was this unclean part of himself, God said to him, "Never consider unclean what God has deemed pure." And then he went, "Oh crap, God, I guess I've got work to do." He joined the United Church, transferred his ordination, and we were ordained side by side. So, I've said a whole lot of things. Maybe some of those things have been really challenging. Maybe some of those things have been freeing. Maybe those things you're mad at me for saying. Maybe some of those things you are not so mad at me for saying. That's okay. You can take mad. There's one last thing before Jenna sings a song for us. Quote I wanted to share. Fuller Seminary is actually an evangelical seminary in the U.S. Louis Smedes is the professor of theology and ethics at this seminary, and he wrote this: "The Christian Church's treatment of homosexuals has become the Church's greatest heresy. It is a living heresy because it's treating God's children as if they aren't God's children. If there is any heresy in the world, it is that."
I grew up scared of my father. His words were known to draw blood. I know that nobody's perfect, but I never questioned his love. When he cursed the television, that goddamn rainbow parade, I wrapped my wounds in religion. That night I learned how to pray. If you poison the apple, why plant the tree? Why plant the tree? If there's one in the city willing to keep, let it be me. Let it be me, Lord. Let it be me. Let it be me, Lord. Let it be me. I'm learning to love the progress. Get more faith with every inch. You're making peace with the thought of growing out of more than your skin. What was once out of the question treat like a daughter. Let it be me when you give me away. Let it be you who is proud of me, sort of. 'Cause blood is blood at the end of the day. If you poison the apple, why plant the tree? If you poison the apple, why plant the tree? Why plant the tree? If there's one in the city you're willing to keep, let it be me. Let it be me, Lord. Let it be me. Let it be me, Lord. Let it be me.
Thank you, Jenna, so very much. So, this is a weighty thing to open up the conversation with, so can you stop the recording? Thank you. I don't know if it's going to shout